I'd like to ask you to do something for me. I would like you to scan back to in your memories to the time when you were, let's say 5. And think who was a tall person to you back then. Think who was big to you at that point in time, outside of your parents or your grandparents, okay? All right, you got that? Now let's move forward to when you became an adult. When you became an adult, was that person still tall? Were they still tall to you, or did time and life shrink them to you? Better still, let's take that same person and think about today, as you think about their life choices and what they did with their life, as you look at them in every possible way. Did that person make it all the way through life being a really tall person to you? Or did their life choices and the way that they lived their life remove them from the tall place they occupied in your mind as you looked up at them with your little soul peering upward? Sometimes as we grow older, people shrink and diminish to us because they just don't live up to who we thought they were. They don't stand up to the scrutiny and advanced wisdom of our own maturity. When I was a little girl, Pastor John Walter was a very tall man in my life and experience. I mostly saw him at the campgrounds where his family and my family would spend a couple weeks each summer at church camp. He was a physically large man to me, and his curly blonde hair seemed to me to catch a special shine because it was so close to the sun. It just seemed very, very big to me. Pastor John, Pastor Ray Altman, and Pastor Bob Turman were golf buddies to my father. And I would always love it when on the afternoons of camp time, they would gather up their golf clubs and they would slip out to play a game of golf, most of the time after the afternoon service. Now, I'm going to tell you a secret, but it's just between us, okay? Sometimes they didn't wait till the afternoon service was over. Sometimes they would just go ahead and go. And I noticed very young that didn't only seem to happen when our mothers were occupied taking care of us children, and they didn't sign off on that so much. But I remember watching it, and I thought it was kind of wild and crazy. I thought it was kind of cool, and they were just a little bit, living life on the edge or something, that they skipped church to play golf just a little bit. I wasn't critical at all. It made them seem a little more real to me, and I actually thought it was awesome. Now, in case you're feeling a little bit critical of these legendary 4 pastors, let me tell you, if you weren't there then, what it was like to attend camp meeting in those days. In those days, especially if you were a pastor, you went to prayer meeting before breakfast, and then you went to the morning service, and then after lunch you would go to the afternoon service, and then you would come to the evening service, and then you would go to afterglow. I was pretty well sure that if you could live through just 2 weeks of camp meeting and do all of that, you had a speeding ticket into heaven. You could just make it just for doing that. I get kind of tired thinking about that now. But Pastor John and his wife Margaret became lifelong friends of my parents. In fact, not just through the days that we were growing up, but my dad, if he were able to be here right now and witness these tributes to his wonderful friends that are being shared tonight, he would tell you that a highlight of my mom and dad's older years were getting together with these retired pastors, their friends. They would get together, and John and Margaret were always part of that. As I grew to adulthood, John and Margaret became my friends too. I remember shortly after Charlie and I were married, John and Margaret came to visit and encourage us in Cincinnati one weekend, and it was, we were pastoring that church while we were going to school, and it was very, very difficult, and they were encouraging to us and treated us to a meal, and it was just a great, great experience to have someone that was older than us, peers with our parents, who consider us valued in that way. As we grew and developed in ministry, I became aware that so many things that moved the kingdom forward in Ohio Free Methodism had John's fingerprints all over them. Today I honor him. Today John is a very tall man in my memory. He has not diminished at all. He has a great place of respect and love in my heart. Pastor John stands tall because of the many ways he led as a pastor in churches all over Ohio. He was so well known for his hospital and pastoral care in the churches he served. Our family personally benefited from John's pastoral care when my own parents faced health crises. He was there for us. And it was not unusual in Canton to pop into the hospital to see my mother when she was there and find that John had been there and visited, or maybe he was still there. Pastor John stands tall because of the physical labor and building expertise he shared so generously with the church. No wonder Paul thought that you carried a Bible in one hand and a hammer in the other, because John certainly did that. In Urbana, well, let me just say this, few pastors have had the record that he's had, not just in Ohio, but anywhere, the record that he's had in building or renovation with so many projects. In Urbana, he helped them relocate to a new building that was an old auto repair garage and renovated as a church. Cleveland First, they bought a new parsonage and renovated the old parsonage as an annex for Christian education space. In Sugar Creek, they relocated to the Dover Road location that served as the property for New Point until they moved to Dover. In Dayton, they relocated, and Pastor John almost single-handedly built the church on Old Troy Pike. Roberts Wesleyan College, this was a source of great pride for all of us in Ohio. He served as the clerk of works, overseeing the multi-million-dollar Life Fitness Center project. We were so proud that Ohio was represented so well there, and I don't think an Ohio person ever went up to see that structure that we didn't point out that we really had a lot to do with that there. And of course, he was involved in updates and smaller projects in just about every church he served. Pastor John also stands so tall in many people's temples of treasured memories because of his work in so many conference teams and boards. Although he served on most major committees in the conference at one time or another, according to his son Paul, his most fulfilling were as chairman of the board of trustees in the Buildings and Locations Committee. He spent countless hours in physical labor on projects all around the Light Life camp. He probably had the most impact as CYC Children's Ministries Director during the 70s. He oversaw the kids camping ministry and saw it grow to what I believe was its numerical height during the time of his leadership. You may not know this, but Pastor John was responsible for launching the John Wesley Award in our conference, and it was later adopted by the entire denomination as its highest award for CLC. It's a great honor for all of us. Receiving it was a highlight of achievement for many young people, including myself. I can tell you where mine is right now. He was innovative, and he loved to challenge younger people to their best. But besides his clear love and devotion to his Savior and his calling, the thing that makes Pastor John stand the tallest in my mind, my memories, is his family legacy. Having grown up in ministry and been in it my whole life, and I've worked with many ministerial families, I know that the stresses of life that are so common in the people we serve and lead do not miss pastoral families either. It is not unusual for pastoral families to be no closer or no healthier than the ones they serve. They often splinter. And so many times, pastoral families endure each other more than they enjoy each other. Not so with the Walter family. As long as I can remember, John was the patriarch of a very close and loving family, serving Christ, each other, and the world. We grew up, but my siblings and I, 3 more besides me, grew up friends with his sons, and our children became friends with their children on the very same campgrounds. And now on Facebook and occasional serendipitous meetings, we still all celebrate our children, our grandchildren, healings, and other great joys. What a terrific family. And it is, in my opinion, John's greatest tribute and legacy, because no other success will compensate for failure at home. And before I finish, I want to take the personal privilege of asking my friends, the Walters, if they would just stand and let me applaud you. Would you please stand? You would have to be a 62-year-old PK to know how wonderful it is to know that all the PKs are in the fold. It's a wonderful blessing, and I'm thrilled by that. In these last years, Margaret went to be with the Lord quite some time before John, and every time that I saw John for quite a while, he was so brokenhearted, and he would weep, and I'd hold his arm and pray for him, and he'd ask me to pray for him. He said, don't stop praying for me when you go home. But then his life was brightened by meeting Linda, and she became his wife, who shared love for Jesus and people with him. They served us and served together by writing a newsletter here. They encourage people both here and in their winter home in Florida. A song that John knew from his youth was, "Will the Circle Be Unbroken?" He prayed and lived to make sure that happened. I have confidence that his prayers are being answered, and I personally look forward to greeting him there. Thank you, Pastor John, for standing tall in my life and memory, and for never doing anything that would shrink you. I honor you.